Okay, hi there, it's the man in the shack. I wanted to take a dip outside the game, actually, and look at some of the organization that I've done on the back end in terms of how I'm dealing with this and kind of the tools that I'm using to break this down. Not so much for the models. The models, which is what most of the videos I've done are, they speak for themselves. I'm just working inside the game and the character pool and stuff. But, outside of that, I've long had this notion of, predefining the classes for every Joe because every Joe is different, and there's an amount of Joes and an amount of powers to where we can reach a good balance and have it, I think, not be able to accomplish what I want without actually breaking the game, if that makes sense. Towards that end, I've done, I started a good while back investigating how this stuff actually works and what the different options that I might have for, actually doing that kind of a thing. And the real the hard part about it is to say, okay, well, I've got, people make custom classes all the time. That's not a big deal, but we're talking about like 84 of them, right? So it's not so much of an issue of how do you do it as how do you organize that much code, right? Because it would become untenable if you're trying to maintain, 10 of them. People maintain 8, 10 classes or whatever, and it's a big deal, The notion here, though, is that the Joes would have particular things, right? Something, so any given Joe would have something that would be the powers that he would have or she that would not, there wouldn't be a whole lot of choice involved, right? Because there's like you don't want to make gung ho a sniper. I mean, maybe you do, and if you do, just don't use this. But I don't want gung ho to end up a sniper randomly. I want to guide things like that. I want to make sure that he gets powers that make him feel like he's big and strong and gives him advantages for doing things that character would do. In other words, that to an extent, I want him acting like a grenadier. Somebody who literally is launching grenades, not a grenadier in game where he also is using the cannon. But more than that, I want to emphasize that he goes up and punches some guy, and that's accomplished through which powers do you give him, what buffs do you give him. He doesn't need to be a cyber adept, that type of thing. So there's a few components that I've built tools that I've built for doing this, and they've evolved over time. I started working on this stuff, more than a year ago, at least, as far as like how do I, what are the things that I need to be able to do. And one piece of it is this is all Python, by the way. That's a programming language that I use, and it's going to look weird if you're not a programmer, but it doesn't matter. I just am using this to kind of talk about what it is that I'm doing rather than I'm not going to go through the code. But essentially, what's going on is that if you're familiar with how the mods work. There is each mod is in a directory, and these are this list here is some of the mods that are that I've been using as reference, for example, and so right now I'm only looking at a particular mod. This is the RPG Overhaul. Let me get to the. Look at the outputs. Okay, so I run this program, and what it's doing is it's going to the place where the mods are. It's looking for this particular mod. It's reading every single file in there, and holding the directory structure for me and stuff, and so that I can see, what are the. I did this originally so that I could look at many mods at the same time, and discover what were their common elements. What did people use in their mods, and what things were they changing, what files were always there, what files were always there and always the same or following some particular pattern, that type of thing. This, for example, is the one mod. This is the contents of that mod. Every single text file, not the actual, not things that are like image files and stuff. This isn't really tracking those, but everything that's like an INI file or a UC file, which is Unreal code. This basically puts that into a place where I can look at them as lists and stuff, and I can use my program to do other things like list out all the powers that I find across the entire series. And so I did that at one point during Long War. I had pulled down basically every single class mod that I could find, and looked at them all as one big list, and I had used that to sort of cull down a master powers list that I was trying to use, because the whole question is, what do I have to work with? Because I just am not really interested in getting into it and to getting into the part of programming this where I am actually creating new powers and stuff. I want to rearrange things that are already there and are being maintained by people who are more in tune with that part. If I had gotten into it at the beginning, I'm sure I could, I could do something with it. But really, this is more about what have other people done and how may I co-opt it and make it into useful in the way that I need it to be. So, with that and that type of program, this my reading code, I'm not going to really go through it. But one of the results is that I'm allowed to do things like start organizing lists of things. And here, what I've done, there's a good bit more of this in my online worksheet. This is kind of where this is what I've been building over all this time, and kind of how I'm, every time I'm finding a little more data or whatever, deciding or realizing that okay, it's a data structure, and I've filled it in over time in different ways. The piece I'm going to look at right now is where I'm going with it, which is. We have the RPG Overhaul, Musashi's RPG Overhaul, which is exactly what we need to make Joes the way we want them to. And so I'm not going to try to recreate what Musashi has already done, because he's done he's done it right, and I could never, I don't need to recreate this code. But what I do need to do is, funnel each G.I. Joe character that's in my character pool, which is, I've got represented across this list here, and I have abstracted into this list here, in which I've got all I've got is a list of code names right now to say this guy is here. I'll move this. This is for some purposes of simplification, basically, right now. And for the next piece of this. So I've got, essentially, let's look at this and say I've got two pieces of data here. Or I've got the list of characters, and this is sort of like the name of the code name. This is sort of the character's, the variable name, if you like, if you're into programming, that it is the name without spaces or special characters like that. It's a simple, what I call a slug, a text string that contains just valid characters. That's for internal reference, essentially. But really, this is just a list of characters that would be there, that are in the piece that I'm looking at now. So that same list of characters is represented here across this top. And what I've done here is I've listed out the 19 different traits that are the first level of the RPG Overhaul. And that, these are the things that, like, every soldier that gets created in the RPG Overhaul gets 2 of these randomly. Well, that's great. That's just perfect to make somebody feel like them, right? Because this is something that's in in them before they even start. So in their first mission, even as a rookie, essentially, they would still have, or I guess they like as soon as they start, they would have these personal traits, and these would be in a group, differently with, or like the next group would be rank 1 and then rank 2, etc. And the weapon that they're using and that type of thing. And if you look, I've got those, sort of in place. The only one I've really filled out is this one so far. And what I did is I went through and I kind of prioritized things in terms of there are some of these that are okay. So I've put them into groups, into sort of logical groups, based on kind of what they're dealing with. Damn Good Ground, Runner, and Stalker are all kind of about positioning people around the field. Blast Padding, Bulletproof, and Deep Cover are are enhancements to defense. Lightning and Reflexes and Moving Target are both essentially dodge. And Eagle Eye, Hitman, and Hotshot are different buffs to shots that are being taken. And Panoptic and Scout are both about recon, about seeing the field. Juggernaut and Praetorian are both physical traits. You've got a big guy and a melee bonus. And then you've got these last four, which I think of as mental traits, which are Prodigy. I'm good at, everything is going to level up faster. Cyber Adept, which is the hackers. Iron Will, which is the will boost, and Xenobiologist, which is the bonus against things that are autopsied. So, looking at those, and looking at these groups, and looking at the different people in them, what I did is I sort of abstracted this and started, like, there were some of them that were obvious. Okay, so Damn Good Ground is, for instance, I need that to be, anybody could have this, but if it's a point of differentiation, then I want it to be people like the pilots. Look, Ace and Airborne, and Ripcord, a paratrooper, and Alpine, who's the only ground-based one, but is still the highest of the ground-based people. So this is people of Alpine's level and up, basically, right? Lift Ticket, who's in his helicopter, Slipstream, who's in the Conquest, and another pilot, Crazy Legs, the other paratrooper, so all three paratroopers, Ghost Rider. So there's a couple of pilots, Windmill and Wild Bill, who are not on this list, but all of the paratroopers are, and everybody that's on this list is either a pilot or a paratrooper, or specifically Alpine. So Damn Good Ground makes sense. And so in the same way, I said Runner is going to be people who are in vehicles that go fast. Clutch is in the Vamp. Rock and Roll is represented as being as having the Ram with him, the motorcycle. So Clutch and Rock and Roll. Cutter, who's in the hovercraft that can go fast. Crankcase, also a driver. Lady J, who in the same way as Rock and Roll is represented having the Silver Mirage motorcycle. Hit and Run, who is kind of the exception here, but that's his specialty, is that he can run. Like he had to have that. Skidmark is the other driver, and then Windmill, who didn't get Damn Good Ground, but his whole deal with his helicopter was that he was super fast. So we've got height advantage and fast advantage. And then Stalker, which is the other one, which is the reduced detection radius, also about positioning on the field, but not about being fast or high, but being about not being seen. Well, that is Stalker himself, of course. Torpedo, with his SEAL training. Deep Six, who's in his submarine. Recondo, who is the jungle fighter, specializes in hiding and stuff. Low Light, that's his whole shtick, is that he can't be found. Falcon is got the same training as Stalker. Tunnel Rat, of course, is that again his sort of specialty sort of lends it to him not being seen. Blizzard is one that I Blizzard got this because of a combination of balancing the snow guys and trying to balance the number of things. Because here's the rule that I did with this is that there are no repeated combinations. Across 84 guys, I repeated nothing. No two guys have the same thing. And I think I've found all of them. It's possible that I still have one or two that are like that, but I believe I found all of them. And the last one that's a Stalker is Ghost Rider, who now has, you can see that he's got two things that are in positioning. Ghost Rider's deal is all about positioning. He's the stealth fighter, right? So he's got damn good ground and Stalker. And then the last one is Spearhead, who's the point man, right? So he's he's going to need to be specializing in not being seen as well. Pardon me. So that's positioning. Defense. Well, I'm going to jump down here to the mentals, because they were a few of the others that were not so much as like. It was very obvious what they needed to be, right? Okay, so particularly Prodigy. You can see there's very few Prodigies and very few Cyber Adepts, and that's because these need to fit the characters. Who's a Prodigy? That's going to be the best soldiers. That's going to be the ones that have, that are the most well-rounded, or the leads, right? The cream of the crop. Scarlet and Snake Eyes, of course, from the first group. And then Duke needs to have this too. He's, as one of the leaders. You see these are kind of the leaders. Stalker and Hawk would be in this, but I've got them with different builds. So Duke, Prodigy. Flint, definitely Prodigy. Lady J also. And so we now have Lady J covered. As look at those. She was on the Silver Mirage, and she's a Prodigy, so she's in good shape. Beachhead, I made a Prodigy because he is one of the leaders also. He's like a squad leader later on. And I needed to have this feel like it was filled out, not just all the front, not just front loaded, basically. I wanted this spread out. And then the last one is Mainframe, for kind of the same reason. I wanted one of the cyber guys to be a Prodigy, and of them, it would be Breaker or Mainframe. And of the two of them, Mainframe proved to be the more well-rounded soldier. Breaker is clearly a genius, and was portrayed as kind of a I like to think of him as a MacGyver type, but he's also not so much of a frontline guy, and Mainframe kind of is. He's like Mainframe. There was I believe it was issue 55. Go read that one with Dusty and Mainframe and young Rashid, who learns about how what Mainframe can do. Anyway, so that's the Prodigies. An important one to restrict to certain people. Cyber Adept also very obvious that there's only some of these guys would have that. Breaker and Flash both have it. You wouldn't don't necessarily think of Flash, but Flash's background was Silicon Valley essentially. I mean, this he, like in the laser technology and stuff, says that he's good at that type of thing as well. Doc, I have given it to because I can't give with Doc. I didn't feel like I could give physical attributes or things that would help him fight. Those aren't what he's about. And I think about the energy mirrors from the cartoon, and that he'd put those together. And I think, okay, well, Doc is not just a doctor; he's also kind of an engineer. And so he would be able to figure that stuff out. I feel like his personality says that he would learn to do this in order to be of more help. Dial Tone, the other natural, Dial Tone and Mainframe, both naturals. They're obviously cyber adepts. Slipstream is the other one. He was portrayed in the comic as it was pushed about his high tech nature. And Jinx, same thing. In the comic, she was a hacker, and so that's the hacking group. Oh, there was one other because I had realized. Yes, Psych Out. This was a doubling that I is that not showing? Okay. This isn't actually conditional. Forget that. Okay, so so Psych Out is the other one, because I had him. I did that to avoid a repeat, because I had him as Iron Will and Xenobiologist, and I had also had this. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but I had also had Airtight as that same combination, and I decided that was more appropriate for Airtight and switched Psych Out to Cyber, which actually in the end gives me a better count balance also. So this would be 8, and that would be 8. I had copied this over, so that's why this is not dynamic right now. It doesn't matter. So at the next, looking at the other groups here, Iron Will is going to be particularly people. Hawk needs to have that. Stalker, that makes sense for him given his personality. Zap, given the kind of things that he has to deal with, especially early in the comics, he's definitely iron-willed. Duke, as one of the leaders, I want him to be iron-willed as well. There's the commonality between him and Hawk as the two leaders. Roadblock it is prominent in the comics how strong his will is. Airtight, for the kind of crap that he has to deal with, is an iron will. Chuckles, again, for the situations that he gets put in, is an iron will. And Psych Out, for the nature of his job, is an iron will. And Blizzard, again, has kind of gotten stuff that needed to be filled in. But his biography also says that he was the toughest and the meanest of the people who did the snow stuff, the snow jobs. So he gets iron will. And Xenobiologist is, I took this to be a couple of things. It's medical things, and it's also people who would be likely to study their enemy, or people who are in touch with nature, that type of thing. Scarlet, because she's intelligence, right? She's studying the enemy. Doc, because he's medical. Ricondo, because he's close to nature, essentially, right? Spirit, same thing. Airtight, because he's creepy and he would study that stuff. Barbecue, because of his medical training, he's an EMT essentially, so he's in that group. Wetsuit, again, Seal, studying the enemy. Outback, in the natural group, and those are my xenobiologists. I realize there's a better way to look at this. I want to. Those were kind of the priority ones, right? A lot of these other ones were kind of subjective, and I just kind of put them in groups. I'm going to look at a better way to look at these real quick. So I read the code using that other thing, the next thing in my sort of pipeline here is to take this data and put it into a relational, not a relational database, but a different kind of database called a graph database, which is a thing that I use, and it is here. Oh, not there. It is here, and it's this kind of thing. You've probably seen these diagrams in some form or another. But essentially, I can look at things by a good way to look at them is by the power group, and to say that here's the mental power group with its four pieces, and this is actually how I caught that problem. Where they caught the repeat, and I can do it like this, and so I can remove this, and I can remove this. Okay, so here are the 4 mental disciplines, and how they sort of shake out, and you can see that there are no repeats between them. Before I had fixed this, let's see, airtight and, oh wait, this isn't fixed yet. Yeah. You can see airtight and psych out have the same pattern. That was how I figured this out, was that, that I could see just by looking at this that you got two going the same way. But here, Doc, Scarlet, Duke, and ideally, this, let's see. So airtight will stay here in the middle, and psych out will actually be up here and will be this connection. And in that way, you can look at that and say, very easily, you can see where where it's off and where it's not. So this is some of the way that I used to sort of to do that. It was a really interesting exercise to take 19 things and divide them amongst 84 people and maintain a balance in that way and have it prioritized in a way that makes sense. So anyway, this database is a rabbit hole in itself. It's fun to play with, but I have a way that because I use these things, I developed a way where I can take an Excel file, which is what this simplification is, and kind of add some some definitions to it and get this database, and then I can use that to pull things out of. Which is this third piece in the chain, and in this, what I'm doing is that's just I'm giving it a list of GI Joes that I want to look at in the order I want to look at them in, and then I do this. The database has a query language to where I can pull things out of it in the way that I want and just the stuff that I want, and then I could write it out into a text file. And that's what I did, and so I can do it like this. I can say read graph, and then it's going to dump the output into a text file, and there we go. Now I have a list by character, see, and you can see these are the things. You can see how they're going to make sense. Breaker is a scout, which is he's using the equipment like the battle scanner. Makes sense for him. Because his radio equipment, he's able to see the whole, it's information brokering essentially is what Breaker is about, right? So he's both scout and cyber adept. Clutch is a runner and a moving target, so he's got the movement and the dodge. Flash is blast padding because he's clearly got blast padding on his chest. And the cyber adept for the reasons mentioned before. Grand Slam, another blast padding. Blast padding, I basically here we can look at it. I've also got it by power, so we can just look at the power groups and see they're the prodigies that I mentioned before. Hot shots are people who can. I believe hot shot is reaction bonus, reaction fire, return fire bonus. And that's wild card in the mean dog because he's got so many guns. Shockwave because his training would lead to that. Hot Law for the same way as a gunner, or he would be the policeman would have quick reactions. And Crazy Legs. All right, I took the paratroopers, Crazy Legs, Airborne, and Ripcord, and made sure that they had similar. Because they were all damn good ground, so I had to make sure that they all had different types of things. Like if you take all three of them, that they perform three different roles, though they have the same, that they have that commonality. And so these are people who would have quick reactions to things. Snow Job, the biathlete. Wild Bill, the trick shot with the pistol. Blowtorch, who's just so nervous about everything that he's going to be on top of it. And Footloose because I needed the infantry guys to have these kind of generic things, and then Shipwreck because he's crazy. The Juggernauts are people who get kind of an extra point of HP, and these are big guys, or guys that are in tanks and stuff, right? Wildcard is both a big guy and in a big vehicle. Same with Armadillo. Backstop, also a big guy. sports injury guy is what I think of him as, right? So I want, backstop to. It's not going to be backstop in the Persuader so much as it is backstop outside of the Persuader, going up and slugging a guy like Gung Ho or something. Heavy metal in the tank, bazooka, a big guy, roadblock, the biggest guy, gung ho, a big guy, rock and roll, a big guy. Those are the juggernauts. Xenobiologists, as I mentioned before, Psych Out is actually in the wrong place. Xenobiologists are people who are, nature people or intelligence people. So, nature people, Outback, Spirit, and Recondo. Intelligence people, Wetsuit and Scarlet. And medical people, Barbecue, Airtight, and Doc. Praetorians are a melee bonus. And so you've got... basically, that breaks down like this. You got guys who would hit things with a stick, Law with a nightstick, Grand Slam with a bat, and you could sort of say Budo with a sword. And then you have Barbecue with his axe. So you've got blunt weapons, bladed weapons, and the rest of these guys are guys that would get into fist fights. There's a beatdown mod inside the game which I use, and that's kind of where that sits, where I'm going to hit somebody thing sits. So the Cyber Adepts, as I mentioned before, those make sense. Eagle Eye is just a straight up aimed shot bonus, and so that's going to be people who have fire discipline, like Hawk or Repeater, let's see, I guess those are the fire discipline guys because they're old soldiers. They've been practicing at the range for many years. You have Hardball, who is a natural, and Fast Draw, who has basically aim help because he's wearing a suit that is based on aiming. Sci-Fi and Low Light are our snipers, who set up the shots, whereas Snowjob is a sniper who is more of a quick shot. Sci-Fi and Low Light are set up shots. Alpine because I want to emphasize the good view, right? He gets up high and then shoots from an advantage point. Thunder because his mobile artillery is giving him a bonus towards he can set up a shot and fire a powerful shot. In the game, I would have Thunder carry a cannon or rather a grenade launcher. Actually, he should be a cannon. So his Eagle Eye helps him shoot the cannon. Well, Repeater would sort of be the same thing, I guess, because he's also using a cannon. In any case, Thunder has his vehicle helping him shoot. Wild Bill is also a natural like Hardball. He's a trick shot, and Short Fuse because he's math guy. Is going to be able to be like Short Fuse would be an excellent shot, basically because of his because he can do the math in his head type of thing. Here are the Stalker group that I went through before for their reasons. The runners, you can see they're all the people in vehicles and fast guys, and hit and run. Bulletproof is a straight up defense boost. That would be tough guys or guys in armored things. So you got Leatherneck, who's a tough guy, cross country. Those guys are all in armored things. So you got Leatherneck and Grunt, who are just tough guys. And then you've got the most ground pounding guys there are, right? And then the rest of these guys are people who are in heavy tank-like things and would have it because of that advantage. Okay, so lightning reflexes, and let me grab moving target as well. lightning reflexes, and moving target. These go together because they're about dodge. Lightfoot is kind of in his biography that he's good at that sort of thing. Hardball, again, he's going to have fast reflexes from being a ball player. Jinx, because of the ninja training. Falcon, because of his just kind of natural ability, and I need him to I wanted him to be one of those. Lifeline, because of his Aikido training, and you can see Lifeline is the guy that has both of these. If you look at Special Missions number 4, Lifeline is a master of Aikido and cannot get hit because he will dodge your shit. So he's the one that gets both lightning reflexes and moving target, and I like doing that to give him that differentiation instead of just having him just be another Doc. Let Doc be Doc and let Lifeline have that awesome character trait. So Shipwreck, again, with his kind of like, I want Shipwreck to be right in there taking chances in the same way that I want Clutch to be taking chances. Quick Kick has lightning reflexes, obviously. Crankcase, of the drivers, that's why Crankcase is sort of like Clutch, but he gets but he's more of a Crankcase is even more of a street racer than Clutch. So like Clutch is more of a mechanic, and Crankcase is more of a take chances driver. And then Mutt from Dealing with the Dog has lightning reflexes, and Snake Eyes along with Jinx ninja training. And then Moving Target, which is less about I'm not going to hit by any individual shot, but more that I have a general dodge boost. Charbroil gets it kind of because Charbroil needed something else, honestly. It was too hard to have. He was a tough one. He was one of my last ones because he's so much like Blowtorch. He doesn't have any, it wasn't very characterized. Like the last group of guys, as I was going through this, it was kind of some tough choices. And that's kind of where I landed with him. But Budo makes sense because of the, he's a samurai guy, and he should be able to, dodge because of that kind of training. Lifeline, as mentioned earlier, Aikido training. Iceberg, same as Charbroil. Unfortunately, he was last in the last group of guys. Cross Country I gave just because the Havoc is such Havoc. So like it's fast, if nothing else, and so. Cross Country doesn't have lightning reflexes, but I think that he can count as a moving target almost. Bazooka, it's in his biography. He doesn't like being in the armored tanks because they were too easy to hit. He likes to be able to run around and stuff. So moving target for Bazooka makes sense. Snow Job, again, on his skis, I want to emphasize movement and then have it being a crack shot, but being a crack shot while moving, to differentiate Snow Job from the other snipers. And Clutch, in the pair with Crankcase, moving target. Let's see. The Panoptic and Scout were the two. Hang on. Oops. Panoptic and Scout are the kind of the recon pair. This is and they kind of like who's going to do it naturally and who's going to do it technologically. So Skidmark is a recon driver. That makes sense for him to have. He's accomplishing this thing with his Desert Fox vehicle. So I'm going to give him Battle Scanner and have that be like that. Shockwave is because he's SWAT is going to have it's like the camera, right? They're putting the camera in the little pinhole and whatnot. This is the equivalent for that. He's using technology to find out what's in the room before he breaks into it. Sneak Peek, obviously. Sneak Peek is the one who gets both of these things because he is the most recon-y guy of all recon guys. And he's using both natural and technological means to do so. Frostbite, because Frostbite, again, with the snow guys, I needed these, not so much personality snow guys to have different things that they were doing. And Frostbite, yeah, he can have, I don't know, there's a radar in the Snowcat or some shit like that. Deep Six, sort of the same thing. He's in the submarine and he can find things, and he's got technological means of finding things. Tripwire, This is sort of the equivalent of his metal detector, I guess. He's finding mines, but there's not really mines to find, and like this. I guess if they can start using claymores at some point, that would be an interesting thing. That would be Tripwire's thing, is that he would be able to find claymores before they go off and that type of thing. But there's not that, so I'm using him. So that's the equivalent of him detecting things. Ace, of course, because he's flying in the plane and he can use that plane to see things. I gave the other one to Breaker, as I mentioned before, because he's got technological means, and Short Fuse because of the way that he thinks about the battlefield. He's going to want to know where everything is so that he can calculate things, essentially, and drop his mortar shell, in this case, grenade launcher, where it is that he wants to. So I don't necessarily have to improve his aim in terms of, because I was talking about Short Fuse earlier and saying he's Eagle Eye. That doesn't matter for the grenade launcher, which is his mortar. This is more about his personality and what would he do in order to facilitate those things. So it's almost giving a kind of a backhanded reason of why he would be, why his grenade would be such a good shot or whatever, even though everybody's grenades are a good shot, but whatever. I think that was all the groups. I never went through. Oh, these. Okay, yeah. Let's see. Hitman and Deep Cover. Hitman is the what is it? The flankers. So Muskrat, Hit and Run, Outback, Iceberg again with the snow guys. Beachhead makes sense as a flanker because he's going to be running out ahead. Mutt also is kind of like there's some guys, Shipwreck, Mutt, Clutch, Dusty, that tend to just run into danger. Not so much Dusty. I don't have Dusty on that list. But these are guys that would unthinkingly run into danger. And Mutt is in that group. And so guys that would unthinkingly run into danger, well, they can kind of get into position to be able to do that. So yeah, I can see Mutt being a flanker. Plus, Mutt is also, you don't think about this, but Mutt is Army Ranger trained. He's another of the Rangers, like Stalker and Falcon. So you don't, it's not made a big deal of, but that's there. Torpedo, I want him. Okay, so with the two SEALs, with Torpedo and Wetsuit, I needed them to have completely different things because to kind of cover the gamut of SEAL training, and to say because the SEAL is kind of good at everything basically, right? And so, so Torpedo, I want him to be the sneaky one, and then with Wetsuit, he's more of a thinker or a demolition guy, and that's why So yeah, that's kind of how they got divided up. But Torpedo is nice and sneaky, and then a flanker. I like that. And then Cover Girl, I gave her flanker because the Wolverine is so, like, the Wolverine, it's going to get everywhere. There's so many rockets, it's like something's going to get covered. The whole, and she's cracking open armor. That's what the whole point of her vehicle is. At the same time, Cover Girl is, she'll hit, she's unexpected, right? And I guess in a way, like, she's been portrayed in different things as, as a spy and stuff. And so making her a flanker is almost like saying that she would find a way to get into position, to get into some advantageous position in some unconventional way. I like that for her. And then Airborne, because each of the paratroopers got a different thing. And Airborne seems like he would be the flanker of the group. And then Deep Cover is the last one here, or Deep Cover and Blast Padding. Let's look at Blast Padding. Blast Padding was another one of the obvious ones that I should have gone over at the very beginning, that like a priority one. So you've got Flash, Grand Slam, Tripwire, Stealer, because Stealer gets is like I'm trying to really represent the Mobat with Stealer, so he gets both blast. He's the most defense guy because he gets both blast padding and the defense boost. Charbroil and Blowtorch have their protective padding on. Lightfoot goes in this group with Tripwire. Fast Draw is definitely wearing blast padding of some kind because he's shooting rockets off of himself. Zap, I'm gonna I put in with the explosive guys because I needed another one for Zap, and that made the most sense. Yeah, those guys. And then Tollbooth, because of his sort of engineering knowledge and stuff, it's not necessary. I mean, sure, the bridge layer is sort of armored and stuff, but I'm not thinking of Tollbooth so much in the bridge layer sense, as in Tollbooth is a battlefield engineer guy, and he would, he would be able to find something, essentially. Like, he would know the right thing to stand behind or something like that. That for whatever reason, that he would be able to construct, basically, blast padding on an as-needed basis. Tollbooth is one of the hidden geniuses. He learned to do what he was doing at MIT. He didn't come off a construction site. He came from a pretty prestigious place. So deep cover is the last one I'm going to look at, and that is the people who are half cover counts as full cover, and so this is like people with heavy soldier training, repeater and grunt. People who are naturally inclined to be hidden, muskrat and tunnel rat, people with rat in their name. Footloose goes up here. That's the commonality between those. Like, all three of my real infantry guys get deep cover. Tollbooth, that is the commonality between him and blast padding. Both of those things are saying that for whatever reason he would be able to find the right thing to stand behind. You see? And then Wetsuit, like I said, to differentiate him from Torpedo and give him a different set of powers, but he kind of goes in that group. Dusty, because he can hide in the, he can hide, basically, right? This is my way. This is my, like, when I was saying that Dusty was in that group with the other guys, this is my way of getting Dusty up close. He would run into danger. Ripcord is kind of the same way. That's why of the paratroopers, I didn't just randomly choose them. I took the 3 paratroopers and said, what are the other powers besides damn good ground that they would have? And Airborne is more of a hide and flank guy. Ripcord was a really aggressive guy. So what he wants to do is get into position and then be there so that he can run right up and shoot the other guy the next time. And then Crazy Legs was more of a thoughtful, kind of more vanilla guy about that sort of thing. And so you can get these little groups that have their commonalities. All the runners have a commonality, etc. And within that group, within each way of looking at it, within each time each direction in which you look, you have a balance. And that's that. There's a lot more things that I've built out of the tools and stuff in different ways. But this is the part that really kind of matters for the next bit, because as I'll put out the, as I'm finishing the character pool itself, and having all of the guys in place, this is, I think, is, at least for me, if it's, like, if nobody else wants to use this, that's fine. But I'll put it in the thing and have it so that, assuming that you're also running the RPG Overhaul, that these Joes, each, instead of being a soldier class, there would be a breaker class. And breaker would be exactly like a soldier, except instead of randomly drawing from these 19, he would randomly draw from just these. You see what I mean? Basically guaranteeing that he would get these 2, and that that clutch and the clutch class would get those 2. Everything else would be the same, but I would sort of hijack those things. And then the next level of that would be to say, that, as you can see in this piece, is that I would continue on that with the weapons and say, what is this person's primary weapon that would be in their initial loadout? Breaker uses a rifle, but he could potentially also use a shotgun or a bullpup or a pistol. There's no reason why he wouldn't. Like, in fact, all of these Joes, like, everybody would be able to use a rifle, for example. It wouldn't necessarily be their primary thing. With Grunt, it's primary. Hawk, it's his primary. But with Rock and Roll, he can use it, but it's not his primary. Rock and Roll's primary would be the cannon. So the idea is that they would, as they come up in the game or as they appear in the armory, they would already be carrying their correct gear because of the loadout feature in the class in the custom classes, and then they could also be restricted, right? I don't want Breaker ever using a cannon because he's not qualified to use that. He never learned how to use that. So it wouldn't be on his list of things that he can change. Not everybody would be able to use a gremlin. Certainly not everybody would be able to use... Well, maybe everybody could use a grenade launcher. I guess everybody could use a grenade launcher. But not everybody would be should be using claymores or something like that, maybe. Certain people are going to be better off using a knife and that type of thing. I want to virtually guarantee that somebody like Law is carrying the arc thrower because he's tasing people, that type of thing. So I can restrict those and make it, at a certain point it's just discipline. Like, these you don't choose, right? Everything else is something that's choosable within the game, right? So with these, I want to be able to force them. And that's why I need to have these extra, the Breaker class and the Clutch class and the flash, class and the Flash class, and etc. But with the rest of these, including what things would they have, would they choose at each level up, because all things are available. By restricting them, you're just kind of making it easier to look at. You don't have to think about it each time. Like, somebody like Hawk, who wants both light 'em up and cool under pressure, for example. It's like, if I make those the only two that are available for Hawk in the opening piece or in the first rank, then I don't have to think about it. I just give him, I give him one as the free rank up, and I buy the other one, and then at the next, at the next level, when he needs close and personal, like, that's the only one on the list, so it's a no-brainer. I just pick the one that's there, and I don't have to think about it anymore. And so that's, as long as all of those make sense and they're covering the things that person would be, then that's, that's another enhancement that can be made. That's all kind of like, but all of that can be handled just by thinking about it each time, and so by saying, oh, well, what do I want to do with them? But these I want to get done. Anyway, I think that's all I want to cover here. Like I said, there's lots more things, but this is the important one for this is the only one that'll really have visibility inside the thing that I'm going to put up on the Steam Workshop. So, and the way that I'll do that is that I'll have one character pool, which is everybody. I'm going to dispense, I think, with the multiple pools, because now because it's getting more organized. I'm going to put it all back into one pool, and have everybody be a soldier, and then I'll have another pool where Breaker is Breaker class, Clutch is Clutch class, etc. So that people wouldn't, anybody that wanted to use it. If you, the viewer of this, want to use that thing, that you wouldn't have to go in and change things manually before you used it, that you could just pull it down and use it. But use one or the other, rather, without having to go in and change a configuration file. So, yeah. That's it for this one. I'll do another thing at another point.